Maxing out your 401k as early as possible is often presented as the gold standard of smart financial behavior. If you are doing it, you are probably told you are ahead of the curve. The problem is that this advice ignores how money actually functions over time, and for many people, following it blindly creates long-term constraints rather than long-term strength. Here is the real issue. A 401k is a powerful tool, but it is also a locked tool. When you direct a large share of your early income into a tax-advantaged retirement account, you reduce your financial flexibility during the most fragile phase of your financial life. That trade-off is rarely explained clearly. Most people believe they are doing everything right because the logic sounds clean. Contribute early, benefit from compound growth, reduce taxable income, and let time do the work. On paper, that logic is correct. In reality, it assumes something that is rarely true, that your income, expenses, and financial stability are already optimized. Consider a common scenario. A 27-year-old earning $65,000 per year decides to max out their 401k. In 2025, the contribution limit is $23,000. That means over 35% of gross income is locked into an account that cannot be accessed without penalties before age 59-12. After taxes, rent, healthcare, transportation, and basic living costs, this person may have very little cash left each month. On spreadsheets, retirement looks excellent. In real life, cash flow becomes tight. The consequence of this imbalance is not theoretical. When unexpected expenses appear, and they usually do, the money is not available. Emergency repairs, medical bills, job transitions, or relocation costs often end up on credit cards or personal loans. A 401k balance might be growing at 7% annually, while credit card debt is accumulating at 18-25%. From a net worth perspective, the math no longer favors the strategy. There is also an opportunity cost that is rarely discussed. Early career years are typically when income has the highest growth potential. Skills, certifications, side income, or even geographic mobility can materially increase lifetime earnings. These opportunities often require liquid capital. When too much money is locked away, flexibility disappears. The individual is technically saving, but strategically constrained. Another overlooked issue is risk concentration. Early in life, your financial risk is already high because your income depends on a single employer and a narrow skill set. Over-allocating savings to a single tax-locked account increases dependency on future rules, tax rates, withdrawal regulations, employer plan quality, and market conditions at retirement age. None of these are fully controllable. None of this means that contributing to a 401k is a mistake. The problem is not the account itself. The problem is the order in which financial priorities are handled. Many people treat maxing out the 401k as step one, when in reality it may be step 3 or 4, depending on the situation. The cost of getting this order wrong does not show up immediately. It shows up years later in the form of limited options, stress during financial shocks, and slower overall progress despite high savings rates. To understand why this happens consistently, we need to look deeper at how income structure, liquidity, and financial systems interact. The reason this problem keeps appearing is not a lack of discipline. It is a structural mismatch between how early career finances actually work and how retirement advice is commonly delivered. Most financial guidance assumes stability first and optimization second. In real life, the sequence is usually reversed. Early and mid-career income is uneven. Salaries grow, jobs change, bonuses vary, and expenses are often unpredictable. At the same time, fixed costs tend to rise faster than expected. Housing, healthcare, insurance, and transportation absorb a growing share of income. When someone commits aggressively to maxing out a 401k, they are making a long-term optimization decision based on short-term uncertainty. Behavior also plays a role. People are taught that saving for retirement is a moral signal of responsibility. This framing discourages questioning whether the timing is right. As a result, individuals follow the rule without assessing whether they have sufficient liquidity, low interest debt under control, or a buffer against income disruption. The behavior is compliant, not strategic. Consider a concrete example. Two workers earn $80,000 per year. Person A maxes out their 401k at $23,000 annually. Person B contributes enough to capture the full employer match, let's say 6% or $4,800, and keeps the remaining difference in liquid savings and taxable investments. After taxes and expenses, Person A has minimal monthly surplus. When their car needs a $6,000 repair and a job change takes 3 months, they rely on credit cards and a personal loan. The effective interest rate across that debt averages 15%. Meanwhile, their 401k continues growing at a long-term expected rate of around 6.7%. The spread between borrowing costs and investment returns works against them. Person B, on the other hand, has a larger emergency fund and a taxable brokerage account. When the same events occur, they sell a small portion of liquid assets or draw from savings without penalties. They avoid high interest debt entirely. Over a 5-year period, Person B may end up with lower retirement account balances, but higher net worth and lower financial stress. Standard advice fails here because it treats retirement contributions as an isolated decision. Phrases like always max your tax-advantaged accounts first ignore sequencing. They do not ask whether the individual has stable cash flow, adequate reserves, or exposure to expensive debt. The advice is not wrong in theory, but incomplete in application. Another structural issue is tax misunderstanding. Many people assume that deferring taxes now is always optimal. However, tax deferral only creates value if your marginal tax rate in retirement is meaningfully lower. For high earners early in their careers who expect income growth, career progression, or business ownership, this assumption is not guaranteed. In some cases, flexibility and diversification across account types is more valuable than maximum deferral. Finally, employer plans themselves are not uniform. Some 401ks have limited investment options, high expense ratios, or restricted withdrawal features. Overfunding such plans early amplifies these weaknesses instead of mitigating them. The pattern is consistent. The problem arises when optimization is prioritized before resilience. To understand the long-term damage this causes, we need to look directly at the mistakes people make and how those mistakes compound over time. The first and most common mistake is confusing tax efficiency with financial efficiency. Maxing out a 401k early reduces taxable income today, but it does not automatically improve long-term outcomes. When liquidity is sacrificed to achieve tax deferral, the system becomes fragile. Over 5 to 10 years, this fragility often results in higher reliance on consumer debt, missed opportunities, or forced financial decisions. To quantify this, consider an individual earning $75,000 annually who contributes $23,000 per year to a 401k. If this creates a shortfall of just $500 per month that must be covered through credit cards or personal loans at an average interest rate of 18%, the annual cost of that debt is roughly $80 in interest alone. Over 10 years, assuming recurring shortfalls and partial repayment, the interest cost can easily exceed $12,000. Meanwhile, the same $20,000 invested at a 7% annual return produces approximately $2,600 in annual growth. The net effect is significantly weaker than it appears when viewed in isolation. The second mistake is ignoring sequence risk in personal finances. Sequence risk is often discussed in investing, but it applies just as strongly to cash flow. Locking capital into retirement accounts early assumes that negative financial events will not occur during that period. In reality, job changes, relocations, healthcare expenses, or family obligations are statistically more likely in early and mid-career years. When these events happen, the lack of accessible capital forces inefficient responses. A third mistake is overestimating future tax advantages. Many contributors assume that withdrawals will be taxed at a much lower rate in retirement. However, future tax policy, Social Security taxation, required minimum distributions, and state taxes all affect actual outcomes. For someone who accumulates a large pre-tax balance early, required minimum distributions can push taxable income higher than expected in later years. Over 20 years, this can erase a significant portion of the perceived benefit of early deferral. Another frequent error is neglecting opportunity cost outside retirement accounts. Using conservative assumptions, investing $10,000 annually in skills, certifications, or a side business during early career years can increase lifetime earnings by tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. Redirecting all surplus income into a 401k reduces the ability to make these investments. This is not an income problem, it is a capital allocation decision. To illustrate this, compare two 30-year horizons. Scenario A prioritizes maximum 401k contributions from year one but maintains minimal liquidity. Scenario B captures employer match, builds a 6-month emergency fund, reduces high interest debt, and invest additional capital flexibly. Scenario A may show a higher retirement account balance at age 40, but Scenario B often achieves higher total net worth by age 50 due to lower debt, higher earning power, and fewer forced withdrawals or loans. The final mistake is assuming that discipline alone compensates for structural inefficiencies. Even with perfect consistency, a poorly ordered system underperforms a well-sequenced one. The issue is not income level, intelligence, or effort. The issue is prioritizing the wrong objective at the wrong time. Understanding these mistakes makes it clear that improving outcomes does not require radical changes or higher risk. It requires correcting the sequence in which financial decisions are made. The practical solution is not to avoid a 401k, and it is not to delay retirement saving indefinitely. The solution is to use a sequenced allocation system that prioritizes resilience first and optimization second. This approach reduces risk, preserves flexibility, and still captures the long-term benefits of retirement investing. The first step is to secure employer matching contributions and stop there initially. Employer match is a guaranteed return, often between 50% and 100% of the employee contribution up to a certain percentage of salary. From a financial perspective, it is one of the highest return uses of capital available. Contributing enough to receive the full match captures this benefit without locking excessive capital. The second step is to build a defined liquidity buffer. This typically means holding 3 to 6 months of essential expenses in a high-yield savings account or equivalent. The purpose is not growth. The purpose is optionality. When income is disrupted or expenses spike, this buffer prevents the need to borrow at high interest rates or to withdraw from retirement accounts with penalties. The system works because it removes forced decisions. The third step is to address high interest debt. Any debt with an interest rate above roughly 7–8% competes directly with long-term investment returns. Paying down a credit card charging 18% is mathematically equivalent to earning an 18% risk-free return. Reducing this debt improves cash flow immediately and increases the effectiveness of all future investments. Only after these foundations are in place does increasing 401k contributions become efficient. At this point, income is more stable, expenses are predictable, and the probability of needing early access to funds is lower. Additional contributions now function as intended, long-term tax-advantaged compounding without creating short-term strain. To improve flexibility further, many individuals add a taxable brokerage account alongside retirement accounts. While taxable investments do not offer the same tax deferral, they allow access without penalties and provide capital for midlife needs such as home purchases, career transitions, or education expenses. The system works by diversifying not just assets, but access. This structure is stable because it aligns with how risk evolves over time. Early in life, risk comes primarily from income volatility and life changes. Later, risk shifts toward market fluctuations and longevity. Sequencing savings to match these risks reduces the likelihood of expensive mistakes. Importantly, this is not a high-risk strategy. It does not rely on market timing, leverage, or speculative assets. It relies on controlled cash flow, defined priorities, and gradual scaling of long-term investments. Over time, the investor still reaches high contribution levels, but from a position of strength rather than constraint. The result is a system where retirement accounts support the broader financial plan instead of dominating it. With the mechanics in place, the final step is to integrate this approach into a clear, long-term structure that shows how outcomes change over time. When the full picture is assembled, the conclusion is straightforward. The effectiveness of a 401k is determined by timing and structure, not by enthusiasm or contribution speed. Used in the wrong sequence, it reduces flexibility. Used at the right stage, it becomes one of the most reliable tools for long-term wealth building. The system can be broken into a clear order. First, retirement contributions should begin with the employer match and stop there temporarily. This secures a guaranteed return without excessive capital lock-in. For most employees, this means contributing between 3% and 6% of salary. At this level, cash flow remains manageable and the account begins compounding without creating pressure elsewhere. Second, liquidity must be established. A 3 to 6 month reserve of essential expenses held in a stable, accessible account changes how financial decisions are made. In year one, this buffer prevents reliance on high interest debt. It absorbs job transitions, medical expenses, or relocation costs without triggering penalties or forced asset sales. The impact is not emotional comfort, but mathematical efficiency. Fewer interest payments and fewer irreversible mistakes. Third, high interest debt must be reduced or eliminated. Over a 5 year period, removing an average credit card balance of $8,000 at 18% saves roughly $4,000, $5,000 in interest. That improvement in cash flow compounds into future investment capacity. By year five, the individual has more investable surplus than someone who prioritized maximum retirement contributions but carried persistent debt. Once these foundations are in place, increasing 401k contributions becomes efficient rather than restrictive. At the 1 year mark, this often means raising contributions incrementally, not immediately maxing out. By year five, many individuals are able to contribute at or near the annual limit without liquidity stress. At this stage, the tax deferral works as intended because withdrawals are unlikely and income volatility is lower. By year 10, the difference between correct and incorrect sequencing becomes clear. The individual who built liquidity and reduced debt first typically holds a balanced mix of retirement assets, taxable investments, and cash reserves. Their net worth is not only higher, but more resilient. Market downturns, job changes, or life events no longer force suboptimal decisions. The immediate action steps are practical and measurable. Review current 401k contributions and identify the amount required to capture the full employer match. Pause increases beyond that level if liquidity is insufficient. Calculate 3 months of essential expenses and prioritize reaching that figure in cash reserves. Identify any debt above 8% interest and create a plan to reduce it systematically. Only after these steps are completed should retirement contributions be scaled aggressively. The core insight is not that saving for retirement is wrong. It is that saving without structure creates hidden costs. Correct sequencing replaces rigidity with control and transforms the 401k from a constraint into a support system. This approach does not rely on predictions or perfect discipline. It relies on order. When the order is right, progress becomes stable, repeatable, and sustainable over decades.